Okay. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Okay. Welcome to Autism Awareness Zimbabwe. And I am Marilyn. I just want to go straight into the reason I am doing this video today. And I hope the sound is good. Okay. So the reason I am doing this video is to talk about sensory processing and regulation. I am aware that people are in various places, and this video has come at a bit of short notice. And I know people will always come and watch this video later on when they have time. So I'm not going to wait for people to gather around. I'm going to go straight into the subject. And then in your own time, please feel free to share this video with anyone you feel may need to get some tips. The type of content I'm sharing today is a game changer. This is input by an occupational therapist from my daughter's school. So many of us ordinary parents may or may not have been aware that it is very important to have people like other professionals like occupational therapists giving our children therapy to help with their behaviors. But in a situation where we don't know or we don't have those systems available, it's difficult to know what we need. This input can actually help you to manage your child's behaviors. And even at home, even at school, even if your child has an autism diagnosis and is in a mainstream school, and the situation is they might be running out of ways to cope with your child. What I'm going to talk about today is something you can even sort of discuss with them, with the staff that look after your child, and share these interventions. That way you'll come up with strategies that you both agree, strategies to help to manage your child's behaviors. Okay, so the topic is sensory processing and regulation. So regulation is important not just for our children. Self-regulation is important even for us adults, even for anybody, Everybody needs to be able to manage their emotions. Everybody needs to know how to manage and regulate their emotions, their behaviors. But obviously, we are addressing when it comes to our autistic children. So these are the best ways. I'm going to go straight into it. So I went for a meeting and the presentation was from an occupational therapist. So what I am going to do is to just go through the presentation, her notes, not my notes, but her notes. Obviously, because she can't come on this live, but I want to share because it's so important and it's so helpful. It has helped me to manage my children's behaviors at home, because sometimes you find yourself in a situation where when your child comes home, you don't know what to do. Some people will just end up just giving the child a device and then just letting it go and then carry on with other things. And you're not engaging with your child. You're not doing anything productive with your child. So let me just go into the theory. We might not finish this today because, trust me, it is a lot. But I want to go through it slowly in a way that I can communicate in simple language, in simple terms, so that anyone can understand. Okay. So the first thing is, when you see your child behaving in a certain way, you need to know whether it is a sensory thing. Is it trying to identify whether it's sensory or whether it's just a behavior, or whether what exactly could be triggering your child. chii chinenge chichikonzera kuti mwana wako ave achishereketa or achiita mamwe behaviors. So I'm going to be just bringing in a bit of Shona just to sort of elaborate and explain. Okay. So is it a sensory issue? Because if it's a sensory issue, it is then important to use the sensory strategies. If it's not a sensory issue, then you can't use sensory strategies because it won't apply, it won't work. You won't get the outcome that you want. So I want to give you an example. I have a daughter, obviously, on the autism spectrum. And there is one behavior which she tends to do. Sometimes she just starts to bite her arm. So is it sensory or is it behavior? Or is it attention? Or what could be the trigger? And it doesn't mean to say that the professionals know everything. Sometimes they are trying to explore, to find out what is the reason, what is the problem. And in my daughter's case, they concluded, the occupational therapist concluded that it is not a sensory issue. It is more because of communication, because she's nonverbal and there are issues with communication. So when she gets frustrated, in some cases, she starts to bite her hand. Therefore, the sensory approach to try to help her to stop doing that will not work. They did try to give her things like chewy toys and stuff like that, but that didn't work. So it's more to address the issues of communication or engaging her in a different way. Okay. So how do we explore whether it's a sensory issue with your child, the behavior that they are presenting? How do we determine whether it's a sensory? And from her notes, you look at things like constantly moving around. So these are some of the things you will identify to confirm that it's sensory. The child is constantly moving around. The person is constantly moving around, constantly moving a part of their body, like rocking. Maybe they're just like tapping their feet or, rocking or fidgeting, and distress during personal care or when touched. I also have a son on the spectrum. In the past, if you touch, sometimes just touching him or touching him on the back, he would scream like he's in pain, like you're hurting him, just because he has an aversion to touching. He didn't want you to touch him because for some reason something would irritate him when you touched him. So, and distress during personal care, we're talking about like bathing someone, dressing someone. And if they are very distressed at that time, then it is highly likely it is a sensory issue. Unable to sit down for a period of time to complete a task. Frequent spurts of running, jumping, rocking, spinning. I think many of you will be familiar with this because many of our children tend to be restless. They're just running, and they hardly sit down, jumping, rocking, spinning. Then we've got biting themselves, pinching, hitting, pushing, finding transitions extremely challenging. When I say finding transitions, it's like changing from doing one thing to the next thing. Those transitions, some of the people on the autistic spectrum find that challenging. And then sometimes often tired, far away, and difficult to engage. Some of them are just zoned out, like in their own worlds, like withdrawn, and it's difficult to engage with them. And then leaning into walls or others, like constantly just leaning against the wall or leaning against someone or something, and not just being able to just support themselves physically. So understanding the sensory needs and preferences makes life less stressful and more productive. Okay. So it's really, really important to try to identify if there are sensory issues with your child or with the person on the autism spectrum that you are supporting. And then when you do that, usually I'm going to tell you what the occupational therapists do. They do this, they identify if it's a sensory issue, and then they work out a sensory plan. But you can do that at home as well. You can try to work out a sensory plan that works for you and your young person. A toolbox, a sensory toolbox, or a sensory diet. Remember, when we talk about diet, some children they prefer certain textures. So once you identify what your child likes to eat, it's kind of like managing, knowing that this is the type of stuff my child likes to eat. This is the temperature of the food that my child wants their food or their drinks to be. For example, my son will only eat warm food or heated food. He does not like it when it's cold. He only wants it at a good temperature or heated temperature so he can eat his food. As soon as it gets cold, you find him wanting to have it heated up again, or he's not going to eat. No cold rice, no cold meats, no, he doesn't want it cold, he wants it hot. And then he also wants hot drink. He likes his tea. He wants it hot. He does not want it cold. So he always wants and prefers the heated temperature for food and drinks. So that's his preference. So you will know what your child's preference is when it comes to various areas, the diet, behaviors, and so on. And then you can communicate that with whoever is supposed to be looking after them, be it at school or at childcare or family members, relatives, or at home or the house help, etc., etc. Okay. Change our support plan. Sorry, change our support and adapt the environment. Okay, so one of the things they then do, the occupational therapists, they advise you to change the way you're supporting your child, to adapt it, to make it suitable, a suitable type of support, and then adapt the environment. So the environment has to be suited for your child. So once you've analyzed everything, put it down on paper, like, okay, I think this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change, this needs to change. We need to buy this, we need to build this. It's just like putting things in place, structuring that environment to make it suited for your child, for your young person, or for the person on the autistic spectrum, so that it's suitable for them. It might be maybe the color or the textures or the type of bedding, the type of chairs. You want a suitable environment for your young people. Okay. And normally, right, sorry, I'm just gonna to add onto that. So this area of changing our support and adapt environment can apply in when it comes to schools. So if your child is in a special school, usually they have everything in place, or they'll start putting things in place based on your child's needs. Now, in a situation where maybe your child is on the autistic spectrum, they're high functioning, but now they are in a mainstream school. And then this mainstream school now says, we cannot meet your child's needs. Not because they can't meet your child's need, but because they don't know how to meet your child's needs. So these are some of the things that they will now need to put in place. For example, they may need a quiet room. if it's a mainstream and they don't have a quiet room, this is like a quiet, calming, safe space where in some cases where your child uh, maybe has a meltdown, they're becoming frustrated, their stress level is at a high. This calming room is a place where that child can be taken, and then maybe some soft, calm music is played, and then there's no distractions, there's no disturbance, and then your child can come back down to a calm level, and all because they have this setup in place. It's not a good thing to then be called, maybe you're at work, they're calling you, oh, your child is throwing themselves all over the floor. Oh, we didn't know what to do. Come and pick up your child. It's not nice. And it's poor management, in other words. So I know that many places who don't know how to deal with children with special needs, not because it's not their fault, it's because they haven't been trained, or they just don't know, they don't have the information and the knowledge. These are things that can be put in place. A safe room, a calming room, where your child, it can then be taken to calm down with someone who will be there, not necessarily holding them, especially if they're throwing themselves all over, but at least they'll be supervised, and then that child can be monitored until they've calmed down in a space where they're not throwing themselves on hard objects. In a safe room, maybe there's soft cushions, soft carpet, soft things, so padded floors or something like that. And there's calm music, the soothing music with the lighting in that room is a calming type of light, and then your child is allowed to calm down. Okay, so this is really, really important. And when I'm looking at Zimbabwe, this is Autism Awareness Zimbabwe, I would want to recommend safe rooms or quiet rooms as a measure that can be made where they have to, for inclusion purposes, where there are other children who are on special needs and in a mainstream school. So if this could be included for inclusion, that would be really good for those particular children who sometimes have meltdowns, who sometimes just need a quiet place to calm down and then calm down and be at a normal, at a calm arousal level. Okay, so I think I've elaborated on that. So the occupational therapists, they usually use an assessment tool. They call it sensory profile. So they do a sensory profile on the child. This is where they do an assessment. So simply, this means taking notes and assessing what the various areas that they are looking at to see how this child presents. Just, like assessing how, like going to the doctor, they want to know what's the matter, what's wrong, this area, that area, this area, how is this child functioning in those areas. So they have their form or forms that they use. Okay, so part of these forms that they use are, if you want to take notes, you can, because I think you can apply this at home as well. I'm not saying you have to be a professional. What it is even if you do visit an occupational therapist, they will recommend for you to do certain things at home. So there is no harm in taking some things and applying them yourself as well. Unless if you can afford a private occupational therapist, that's great. If you can afford private therapy or private, that's great. But then not everybody can afford it. So some things you can learn. Even if you don't have to apply it at home right now, you can take what I'm saying and then you can actually look it up and then try to understand. And then eventually you'll find that this stuff is going to be helpful for you. It's it's been a life changer for me. I'll explain later how and why, but I need to go through this theory phase first to explain to you about sensory processing and regulation first, and then I will show you how it has what I have done for myself, because I'm not in a position to afford an occupational therapist, and unfortunately our NHS National Health Service does not provide occupational therapy. It's very limited. Okay, it's very limited. You don't get it on a daily basis, and it would be great to get it on a daily basis. It would also be great for the children to get occupational therapy when they get diagnosed from 2 years old, rather than to have it at school when they're in a high school. Remember, children meet their milestones at a very young age, and it's very important for them to get those practical interventions when they're very young. It helps them. It's better for them at that age, and it stimulates their brain faster than when they're in their teenage years or in their adult years. My children didn't get. They only got 6 hours of occupational therapy. 6 hours. That was it. That was it. That's the end of it, and that is not correct. Occupational therapy is supposed to be ongoing, daily, weekly, at least. And I would want to ask the National Health Service of the United Kingdom, can you please put occupational therapy, integrate it into the services for children being diagnosed with special needs and autism from right when they get diagnosed, make it be something that's like a very necessary right at the beginning, because many a times our children need that intervention. They need it from that age. They need to learn how to hold pens, hold forks, put on their own clothes, wear their shoes, even just stimulating their brain, the regulating their behaviors, self-regulation, potting, toileting. It's necessary for the children, and even speech therapy. It's necessary for the children to get this from very early on rather than later on in life. It is a bit, it's not useless later on in life, but it would have been more useful right at the beginning where it should be. So please, NHS, put that measure in place. Government, please put that measure in place. Government of UK. Government of Zimbabwe, I also would like to recommend you do the same. That's all I can say. But we also need more special schools with more, and I'm not really aware on the scope of what's happening in Zimbabwe right now. But I do know that there has been an increase of special schools. But I don't know if they do have integrated things like occupational therapy and stuff. So I really don't know. So, but as I am sort of communicating with you parents, these are the things that are vital. So you will have to do that homework. Okay, so occupational therapy, they do assessments. Okay, that's where I ended. They do assessments, and part of these assessments include auditory processing. So when we're talking about auditory processing, we're referring to the ears and hearing. And then they assess all when matters regarding hearing for your child, and they have a way of grouping it. So whether your child reacts strongly to unexpected loud noises, for example, the ambulance sirens, police sirens, dogs barking, hair dry, loud sounds, holds hands over their ears. Some children do like keep on holding their hands over their ears to protect them from sound. So I just want to say, sometimes if you see your child holding their ear like this, don't tell them, take your hand off your ear. It's to do with the auditory processing. And in general, if your autistic child is doing something, a behavior that does not harm anyone, or if they have a behavior that does not harm themselves, as long as they are not harming you, as long as they are not harming someone else, as long as they are not harming themselves, it is recommended for you to leave them, because that is their output. They are letting it out. If you stop them, they're going to find something else to do, because it's kind of like you're blocking them from regulating. That's how they're expressing themselves. So it's so important for you to understand certain behaviors of your child and why they're doing it, and whether it's a sensory regulation, because maybe that's how they're letting it out. Maybe that's how they're, letting that's how they're letting the steam out. Maybe that's how they're expressing themselves, and then you are blocking them and you are stopping them, and they're going to get agitated, or they're now going to suppress those emotions or those feelings, and then that's not going to help them in any way, and you're not helping them to regulate those emotions and those behaviors. And so, yeah, as long as they're not harming you or anyone else, or any animals, or just, it's encouraged to just leave them. Okay. So in this case, the child is holding the ears. That's a sign of auditory processing. Struggles to complete tasks when there's music on the TV. Distracted when there's a lot of noise around. Becomes unproductive with background noise. For example, a fan, a refrigerator. Tunes me out or seems to ignore me. Sometimes your children seem like they're tuning you out or ignoring you. Sometimes they might be hearing you, but you think they're not listening, they're not. So be aware that the response may not be the response that you are expecting. You might be calling their name like Lucy, Lucy, and Lucy is just, they can hear you, but they're not looking at you. So it does, sometimes with the autistic children, they don't have to look at you for you to know that they are listening or they can hear you. Sometimes they can hear you, but they won't express it. So they might be looking away, but they heard everything. They heard it all. So unfortunately, with the children who are nonverbal, it's very difficult to tell. It's hard, you don't know. It's difficult to tell. And then also when it's auditory processing, be aware that there are children who obviously they don't want the loud noises, so they're very sound sensitive. So if there's loud, like, I know our fellow mamas, we love to like, hey, we love to scream, and I do that as well. I'm guilty. My son now, he hates the loud noises. He despises loud noises, and then I won't be surprised, like you screaming like, hey, my son tends to just come and he will slap. He's 8 years old. He'll just like, like on your mouth, like, or try to hold your mouth, because the processing of the sound into his ear is not the same as us. It might be piercing to him. It might be processing in a way that's not comfortable for his ear. So there is issues regarding auditory processing on some of the, I'm not saying everybody, but some. So if you see them holding their ears, a lot of autistic, like my son holds his ears. One child holds their ears, the other one doesn't. The other one doesn't have a problem, but my son has this thing. He's always holding. Sometimes he's holding both ears. Sometimes he's doing like this, And later on, I am going to talk about what to do, what other things that can be used to help. Things like, the headphones that they use and stuff like that. I'll do that on a later stage, or the later. That's why I needed to do this video, get it out of the way, so I can get to that stage, because I promised to do this, and time is just ticking. Okay. Right. Also, auditory person enjoys strange noises, or makes noise for fun. Yeah, auditory processing doesn't just mean about listening. It also talking about vocalizing as well. Some of our children are vocal, very vocal. My son is always singing. You don't know what he's saying, we don't understand what he's singing, but you can hear the tune, you can hear something being played on TV or something, and he will start singing along as well. And he won't say the words, but he will be singing. You can hear the tune. Like, even if I make up some songs, you can hear him trying to copy the tune of the song. So that he's processing, that's also what? Auditory processing. And he enjoys doing that. Don't stop him from doing that. Don't stop the children from singing. Don't stop them from making those vocal noises. In the world of autism, you will find a lot of children. I've visited a school. You will find different sounds, odd sounds, weird sounds. You will find mooing. They call it mooing, like a cow. Mm, mm, mm. Please, if you see someone in the shopping center with their child mooing, mm, mm, don't look at them like they're from planet Pluto or planet, this is part of the autism auditory processing. So allow it. Don't, just don't look at them like they're foreigners, like from, I don't know, some planet, other planet. And then some children make sounds like a barking. I've heard like a barking, like whoop, 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 like whoop, whoop, and so many various sounds, so it's not something to mock. It's not something, it is strange if you're not accustomed, if you've seen it for the first time, but it's not abnormal. It's one of the behaviors, one of the vocal sounds you can hear someone on the autistic spectrum doing. So, I know not much is publicized in the public or on TV where people really know the magnitude of autism, but autism can be very deep. It can be very, deep. So some things are just like that. That's just what it is. So if you see your child making these sounds, sometimes it's a sign that they are happy, but sometimes maybe they're in pain, sometimes they're sad. So you need to know and distinguish, well, how your child is, how they are processing their behavior, what is the state of their behavior. So this is part of the auditory processing on their assessments. Yeah. So they check to see how often your child, the frequency, like often, almost always, half the time, then, they try to get what they need to get from that. So that's auditory processing. Then they look at visual processing. Visual, we're looking at the eyes, obviously, and whether your child prefers to play or work in low lighting. So there's a lot of issues regarding light sensitivity. Some of the lights that are made are too bright. Sometimes maybe the sun is too bright for your child on the autism spectrum. Maybe your child doesn't want too much bright sunlight. So it might be a good idea to give them maybe sunglasses, or to give them a hat to cover, to give them shade. Or maybe if they have a bedroom that's, put some curtains or something that will block the large amount of sunlight. I know in Zimbabwe, there's a lot of sun. Or when you go outdoors, maybe give them a hat, something that can cover their eyes if they are sensitive to bright lights. And then obviously maybe in the house, there's different lights these days, dimming lights that you can dim to give them, to have a calmer texture of light, if I'm to put it that way. Or maybe if your child has a bedroom, all these sensory lights. So that's your homework. You can research on the best type of lights for autism if your child has sensitivities regarding light. But then obviously seek the professional, go visit the doctors and the occupational therapist. I don't want to give you recommendations and then you say, oh, because I'm not coming from a professional angle. I'm just relaying what was presented, which has been helpful to me. None of my children have light sensitivities, I must say. So I'm not really, some children may wear glasses, Okay, enjoys looking at the visual details in objects. I've noticed that on my son. He looks at visual details. You know, some children will look at everything, even if you have an object of something, a toy or something. They can look at it and they will identify everything. Yeah, yeah. You can notice that in some of your children's behaviors if they have that ability. Okay, needs help to find objects that are obvious to others. Is more bothered by bright lights sorry than other same-aged children. Watches people as they move around the room. Some children get distracted when they see other people moving in the room. They just like the eyes will follow, and then they can't concentrate. They can't focus because there's so much. They're always distracted. Any little thing they're distracted, and that's an issue regarding visual processing. And then the occupational therapist will put something in, will try to put something in place, some interventions to see what they can do to help when it comes to issues of concentration, focusing, and trying to keep to task rather than getting distracted. Because there are interventions that can be put in place, which I'm going to talk about as well, that can help focus, help concentration. When you see a lot of these videos online and these toys that are being sold for children, you're just like, oh, it's just another toy, because we don't really understand why these toys, the point of those toys. Some toys are meant for focus, helping a child focus. This is the rationale behind. Some toys are meant to help your child focus. A simple thing that can help your child focus is maybe coloring or just doing an interesting activity that your child likes, that's in front of them. You'll see when they engage in that thing, or you are there helping them to engage, already there's focus. There's no distraction. There's focus. And sometimes when you want to work with your child, okay, let me have a drink. Sometimes when you want to work with your child, it is a good idea to just be one-to-one with your child, or get a room, no distractions, no TV, everything switch off, just one-to-one. That's why therapy rooms usually is just a room, there's no distraction, it's quiet, and then you focus on the specific task that you want to work with your child. And it works because there's no distractions. And at least you can get some positive results. Okay. So yeah, it's about the bright lights, visual processing. Okay, so different ways to respond. Okay, so I'm going to talk about different ways that the children can respond, or the people on the autistic spectrum. They give them two terms. One is called an anxious avoider. The other one is called a sensory seeker. These are just terms that they're using within that field. So when they are doing their assessments, they'll understand that this one is the anxious avoider, this one is the sensory seeker. So the anxious avoider has a low threshold, whereas the sensory seeker has a high threshold. Okay, so when I say a low threshold, the anxious avoider has a low threshold. This is someone who can't tolerate anything. They can't tolerate too much noise. They'll just start screaming. That they just can't have it. They can't, it's just too much. It's too much. Everything is too much for them. They can't cope with a lot of things. Yeah. And then they become anxious. So when they become anxious, they melt down. You see them screaming, kicking, they'll be rolling on the floor. This is when because their first set, what do they call it? Fight or flight. And then the first thing for them is flight. Let me just get this, what she's trying to say. Notice everything. Okay. A little is already too much. Notice everything and are unable to filter hypervigilant, big emotional responses, fight or flight, sensory meltdown. So the anxious avoider is the person who cannot cope with a lot of the things that are happening in the environment. They can't cope. And or they can be in a situation at some times where they cannot cope. They are overwhelmed quickly. Then they'll go into a meltdown and they'll, start kicking and screaming. And usually this is the time when you'll see the teachers calling the parents saying, oh, your child's having a meltdown, we don't know what to do, that's the anxious avoider. It's not like a permanent, they're always anxious, but maybe it might be on a particular day or particular hour or something like that, that they've become anxious. Or maybe it's just a characteristic of that person. Then the sensory seeker has a high threshold. They can tolerate a lot of things. They're like a good child. Like they're not bothered. Like everything is fine. They're not scared. They're risk takers. Absconders. Oh, I'm not sure what she meant by absconders. I can't remember. Let me just check my notes. One second, I'm just checking. Okay, so the sensory seekers, right? They can never get quite enough. They can put everything into their mouth, chewing things, experimenting. They just pick and put everything, anything, leaves, flowers, pen, fingers, and other things. They're risk takers. They can running out of windows. That was an example. I think someone had a situation where the child would just run, absconding. Like these are the ones where if the door is open, they're not aware of danger. They're not aware of danger. If the door is open, they will just go and they just leave the house and you don't know where they've gone. Or they'll just run across the road. Or they'll just run off. They're not scared. They'll just do it. A lot of autistic kids are not aware of danger. So they just do things that they're not aware of the dangers. Those are sensory seekers. They just seek the opportunity is there and they take it. They don't think about the repercussions. They don't know the dangers. They just like whatever, anything. So these are different responses to, these are two types of different responses. So, okay, then visual processing. Visual processing. Did I talk about visual processing before? Oh, I talked about auditory processing. Okay. Oh, yeah. Visual was the one on the lighting. That's right. Yeah. So there's touch processing. I just want to check my time. Yeah, I think I've still got about at least 20 minutes. I'll talk a bit more and then I might have to stop so I don't overwhelm you. And then I can carry on again. So let me just do touch processing and I'll stop now and then I will see if I can carry on this video on the next part so that we can get to the stage where I will talk about the physical side of occupational therapy and the things that you can use to help manage emotions and regulation in your child, and also to help to manage the behaviors as well as to do structured play, structuring how you play with your children, even at home. And this has worked for me because my children are now looking forward to coming home from school. And if not even just the autistic child, but the other one is interested now in like playing with his sibling. He's interested in, oh, mommy's planned another activity today. What is it, mommy? Like, he was asking, he said, Mama, what's today's activity? And it was like rolling on a ball, this big, the gym balls. So you roll on that and you try to sort some toys and stuff like that, or put some apples in a basket. So fun things, you can come up with all sorts of fun things to address those certain different areas. So I'll show you all that. So I'll just finish this video on touch processing. I don't want to make it too long. I don't think it's necessary to make it too long. The point is I want to communicate, and so you can understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so touch processing is okay. Let me just go through the how they assess that. It shows this: if your child shows distress during grooming, for example, fights or cries when he's having a haircut, or when he's having his face washed, or fingernails cut, or brushing teeth, you know, when your child becomes irritated by wearing shoes and socks. I have a culprit in my house. My son hates socks and shoes. And then shows an emotional or aggressive response to being touched, becomes anxious when standing close to others, rubs or scratches a part of the body that has been touched, touches people or objects to the point of annoying others. That's quite common. Again, some children do that. My daughter used to just go to a random stranger, grab their hand, and start doing this, like she just starts assessing the hand, looking to see, oh, like she's never seen a hand before. And then the person will be like, or if I say, oh, don't worry, they're autistic, they're just like, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, don't worry. Displays the need to touch toys, surfaces, or textures. For example, want to get the feeling of everything. Seems unaware of pain. Seems unaware of temperature changes. If some children, they just don't know when it's too hot. They don't know when it's too cold. The weather is hot, but they're wearing a jacket. The weather is cold. They don't want to wear a jacket. Things like that. Touches people and objects more than the same age children. Seem oblivious to messy hands or face. Some children, they'll mess up touching mud or feces, things like that, and they're not aware that you're not supposed to do that. So that would be assessed. That's called touch processing. And then obviously the occupational therapist will now look into that. How frequent does your child do those things? And then they'll come up with ways to manage those emotions and behaviors. So I'm going to stop here. As I said in the beginning, this is the theory side of sensory processing and regulation, and it's very important to know this, because it's then important to now know how to then manage your child's behaviors. So you don't have to wait for the professionals. You can manage your child's behaviors at home as long as you know what to do. Trust me, it's very interesting, and you can be empowered, and you can, you don't need to always be stressed, because autism can be stressful, but if you know how to manage these things, you're now in a powerful position. So you can win, and you can do this. And yeah, I just want to encourage you, just you can do it. So I'm going to stop here, and please let me know if this is something of interest to you, or if this is something that is impacting in your nursery, your home, your family, whichever way it's impacting on you. Uh, Please let me know anything that you need to let me know, or to change, or whatever, so I can improve, or I can know if what I'm saying, or this time I'm spending is worth, is benefiting anyone. So let me know that in the comments, and please like and share. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time today. Okay, bye-bye.